The glass walls of the 60-story Blackwood Industries building trembled as CEO Adrian Blackwood slammed his fist against his mahogany desk. Red warnings flashed across every monitor in his corner office, each screen displaying the same horrifying message: system breach, all data corrupted. His empire, built over 15 years of relentless work, was crumbling in real time. Bank accounts showed zeros where billions once sat. Client files had vanished. Stock prices plummeted like stones dropped from heaven. Adrian's face went pale as he watched his life's work disappear before his eyes. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the timing. Tomorrow morning he was supposed to sign the biggest deal in corporate history, a merger worth $12 billion that would cement his legacy forever. Instead, he would have to explain to investors how sophisticated hackers had infiltrated every layer of his security system, stealing everything and leaving behind only digital ashes. His hands shook as he reached for his phone to call his lawyers, his accountants, anyone who might have answers. But deep down, Adrian knew the truth. He was ruined. Hours passed like torture. Adrian sent his staff home, unable to bear their worried looks and whispered conversations. The building grew quiet except for the hum of servers still trying to process corrupted data. He loosened his silk tie and unbuttoned his tailored shirt, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. This was it. 15 years of building the most innovative tech company on the West Coast, gone in a single evening. The press would have a field day. His competitors would celebrate. His family would pretend to comfort him while secretly counting the inheritance that would never come. At 11:30 p.m., Adrian heard footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. Security made their rounds at midnight, but this sounded different. Lighter. More cautious. He looked up from his desk where he'd been staring at the same error message for the past hour, his eyes red and strained. Through his glass office walls, he could see a figure moving through the cubicles outside, pushing a cleaning cart. The night cleaning crew. He'd forgotten they still came this late, working invisibly while the corporate world slept. The cleaner was a young African-American woman, probably in her late 20s, wearing a simple blue uniform with her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She moved efficiently between the workstations, emptying trash cans and wiping down surfaces. Something about her calm presence in the midst of his chaos struck Adrian as oddly comforting. Here was someone whose world wasn't ending, someone who could still perform simple, honest work while his complicated empire burned around him. As she approached his office area, their eyes met through the glass. She paused, her dark eyes widening slightly at the sight of him still there so late, clearly distressed. Most executives would have looked right through her, but Adrian found himself studying her face. She had intelligent eyes and moved with a quiet confidence that seemed out of place for someone in her position. When she noticed his obvious distress, something shifted in her expression. Instead of hurrying past like most service workers would when encountering a stressed executive, she slowed her pace, concern evident on her features. Adrian tried to compose himself, straightening his shoulders and attempting to look less like a man whose world had just collapsed. But the effort was useless. The weight of his situation pressed down on him like a physical force, making it hard to breathe. He was 52 years old, had built one of the most successful tech companies in the country, and now sat alone in his office at midnight, watching everything he'd worked for slip away through his fingers like sand. The cleaning woman knocked gently on his glass door. Adrian looked up, surprised by the interruption. Most of the cleaning staff avoided interaction with executives, especially distressed ones working late. He gestured for her to enter, curious about what she might want. She stepped inside, her cart remaining in the hallway, and closed the door behind her. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, her voice carrying a slight southern accent. "I don't mean to intrude, but you look like you're having a really tough night. Is there anything I can do to help?" Adrian almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Here he was, facing the collapse of a multi-billion-dollar empire, and a night cleaner was offering to help. What could she possibly do that his team of Harvard-educated engineers and MIT-trained security experts couldn't? But something in her tone stopped him from dismissing her offer. There was genuine concern there, and a confidence that seemed to suggest she might actually be capable of more than emptying trash cans. "Thank you, but I don't think anyone can help with this mess," Adrian replied, gesturing at the wall of monitors still flashing error messages. "Some very sophisticated hackers have destroyed my company. Everything we've built over 15 years is gone. Our systems, our data, our money, everything." The woman stepped closer, her eyes scanning the monitors with an intensity that surprised him. She wasn't just being polite. She was actually studying the error messages, reading the technical details that most people would find incomprehensible. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she moved from screen to screen, taking in the scope of the damage. "May I take a closer look at your main terminal?" she asked, already moving toward his primary workstation. "I might be able to help more than you think." Adrian hesitated. Company policy strictly forbade unauthorized access to executive systems. But what did company policy matter when the company itself was dying? Besides, there wasn't much left to protect at this point. He nodded and stepped aside, watching as she settled into his chair with surprising familiarity. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with the fluid precision of someone who'd spent years coding. This wasn't the uncertain typing of someone unfamiliar with computers. This was the smooth, confident movement of an experienced programmer. Adrian watched in growing amazement as she navigated through system directories and accessed diagnostic tools he didn't even know existed on his own computer. "This is interesting," she murmured, her eyes reflecting the glow of the monitor. "The attack vector is sophisticated, but they made some assumptions about your backup protocols that might not be accurate. Tell me, do you have any offline storage systems that weren't connected to your main network tonight?" Adrian stared at her in disbelief. This cleaning woman was speaking the technical language of cybersecurity like a seasoned expert. How was this possible? Who was she really? Are you curious to see how a simple cleaner could save a billion-dollar empire? Will Adrian's life change forever tonight? Subscribe and comment below with your thoughts on what might happen next in this incredible story of unexpected heroes and second chances. "Who are you?" Adrian asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air between them as the woman continued typing, her fingers dancing across the keyboard with the skill of a master pianist. She paused for just a moment, glancing up at him with those intelligent, dark eyes that seemed to hold secrets. "My name is Jasmine Washington," she said simply, then returned her attention to the screen. "And before I started cleaning offices at night, I spent 8 years as a senior software engineer at Technova Systems. I specialized in cybersecurity and network architecture." She pulled up another diagnostic window, her expression growing more serious. "I can see what they did here, Mr. Blackwood. It's elegant work, but they left fingerprints." Adrian sank into the chair beside his desk, his mind reeling. Technova Systems was one of the most respected tech firms on the East Coast. Their cybersecurity division was legendary in the industry. If Jasmine had worked there for 8 years as a senior engineer, she was probably more qualified to handle this crisis than most of his current staff. But why was she cleaning offices instead of running IT departments? "Why?" he asked. "Why are you working as a cleaner if you're a cybersecurity expert?" Jasmine's hands never stopped moving across the keyboard as she answered. "Life happens, Mr. Blackwood. My mother got sick 2 years ago. Cancer. I moved back home to take care of her, and the only job I could find that offered flexible hours and decent health insurance was with the cleaning company. Sometimes we do what we have to do to take care of the people we love." The simple honesty of her answer hit Adrian like a physical blow. Here was someone who'd sacrificed her career, her future, everything she'd worked for to care for a sick parent. While he'd been building his empire, thinking only of profit margins and market dominance, she'd been making the kind of sacrifices that truly mattered. And now, in his darkest hour, she was offering to help him even though he was a complete stranger. "I'm sorry about your mother," Adrian said quietly. "Is she?" "She passed 6 months ago," Jasmine replied, her voice steady but soft. "But those 2 years I got to spend with her were worth everything I gave up. She got to see her grandchildren grow up. She got to teach them her famous apple pie recipe. She got to tell them stories about their great-grandmother and where our family came from. Some things are more valuable than career advancement." Adrian felt a lump forming in his throat. When was the last time he'd visited his own mother? When was the last time he'd prioritized family over business? He couldn't even remember. All those board meetings and conference calls that had seemed so important suddenly felt trivial compared to the quiet dignity of the woman working to save his company. "I found something," Jasmine said suddenly, her voice taking on an edge of excitement. "Look at this. The hackers assumed your backup systems were integrated with your main network, but you've got some older servers that were never connected to the internet. They're clean. All your core data is still there, it's just not accessible through your current network infrastructure." Adrian leaned forward, hope flickering to life in his chest for the first time in hours. "Are you saying we can recover everything?" "Not just recover it," Jasmine said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "We can trace the attack back to its source and build better defenses than you had before. But I'll need access to your server room and about 6 hours of uninterrupted work. This is going to be complex." Without hesitation, Adrian stood up and pulled his master key card from his wallet. Whatever you need. Full access to everything. Just tell me what to do. Jasmine looked up at him, surprise flickering across her features. You're trusting me with your entire company based on a 5-minute conversation? You're the first person tonight who's offered me hope instead of sympathy, Adrian replied. And frankly, what choice do I have? If you can't help me, I'm finished anyway. But if you can? He trailed off, hardly daring to voice the possibility that his nightmare might have a solution. Jasmine nodded and stood up, already moving with the focused energy of someone with a plan. Then let's get to work. But I have one condition, Mr. Blackwood. When we fix this and when your company comes back stronger than ever, I want you to remember that it wasn't just your money or your technology that saved you. It was trusting the right person at the right moment. Adrian followed her out of his office, watching as she confidently navigated the hallways toward the server room. Her cleaning cart sat abandoned by the elevator, a reminder of the life she'd been living just an hour ago. Now she moved like the executive she'd once been, her shoulders straight, her step purposeful. The transformation was remarkable. As they reached the secure elevator that led to the basement server room, Adrian realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just about recovering his data or saving his company. This was about discovering that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the person who can change your entire life is someone you'd normally never notice, someone whose potential you'd overlook because of assumptions about their circumstances. The elevator descended into the depths of the building, carrying them toward either disaster or redemption. Adrian glanced at Jasmine, who was studying the key card he'd given her with the same intense focus she'd applied to his computer systems. In the space of an hour, she'd gone from being an invisible night worker to being his only hope for survival. The irony wasn't lost on him that the woman cleaning up other people's messes might be the one to clean up the biggest mess of his life. Jasmine, he said as the elevator reached the basement level. Whatever happens tonight, I want you to know that I'm grateful. Not just for your help, but for reminding me that there are still people in the world who offer kindness to strangers without expecting anything in return. She smiled at him, the first real smile he'd seen from her since they'd met. It transformed her face completely, revealing not just intelligence and competence, but warmth and genuine caring. Let's see if you still feel that way when you get my consulting bill, Mr. Blackwood. For the first time in hours, Adrian laughed. A real, genuine laugh that seemed to release some of the crushing pressure in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, this impossible night might have an ending he could never have imagined. The server room hummed with the sound of hundreds of machines, their blue LED lights creating an almost ethereal glow in the dimly lit space. Jasmine moved between the towers with the confidence of someone who belonged there, her eyes scanning labels and connection points while Adrian watched in fascination. She'd asked him to bring coffee and sandwiches from the executive kitchen, understanding that they were in for a long night of intensive work. Here's what happened, Jasmine explained as she connected her laptop to one of the isolated backup servers. The hackers used a multi-vector attack. They came in through your email system, planted malware that slowly mapped your entire network over several weeks, then activated everything at once tonight. But they assumed all your systems were integrated. These older backup servers were installed before your last major upgrade, and they're operating on a completely separate protocol. Adrian nodded, though much of the technical detail went over his head. What amazed him was watching Jasmine work. She'd shed her cleaning uniform jacket and rolled up her sleeves, revealing arms that moved with practiced precision as she connected cables and accessed system after system. Her transformation from janitor to cybersecurity expert was complete, and Adrian found himself wondering what other talents were hidden in the people he'd never bothered to really see. The beautiful thing about their attack, Jasmine continued, lines of code streaming across her laptop screen, is that it was so comprehensive, it actually makes our job easier. They deleted everything from your primary systems, which means we have a clean slate to work with. We can restore from backup and implement security measures they'll never see coming. As the hours passed, Adrian watched Jasmine orchestrate what could only be described as a technological resurrection. She rebuilt his network architecture from the ground up, implementing layers of security that made his previous system look like a screen door on a submarine. Her knowledge wasn't just theoretical. She understood the practical realities of running a large corporation's IT infrastructure. How did you learn all this? Adrian asked around 3 a.m. as Jasmine paused to eat one of the sandwiches he'd brought down. Necessity, she replied simply. At Technova, I was the person they called when everything else failed. You learn to think creatively when conventional solutions don't work. And taking care of my mother taught me patience and persistence. Sometimes the solution isn't obvious, but it's always there if you're willing to keep looking. Adrian found himself studying her profile as she worked, noting the determination in her expression and the gentle competence in her movements. Here was someone who'd faced real adversity and emerged stronger, someone who understood that success wasn't just about talent but about character. He realized he was learning more about leadership from watching her work than he had from any business school or executive seminar. "Got it?" Jasmine announced suddenly, her voice carrying a note of triumph. "Look at your main monitor." Adrian turned to see his company's systems coming back online one by one. Financial data that had been corrupted was now restored and updated. Client files that had vanished were reappearing in perfect order. Stock trading systems that had been offline for hours were reconnecting to the markets. It was like watching a patient come back to life after cardiac surgery. "This is impossible," Adrian breathed, watching as his company's true financial position became clear on the screens around them. Not only was everything restored, but the system was running more efficiently than it had in months. "How did you do this so quickly?" "I didn't just restore your old system," Jasmine explained, her fingers still flying across the keyboard as she made final adjustments. "I rebuilt it better. Faster processing, stronger security, more efficient data management. Think of it as getting a heart transplant that gives you the cardiovascular system of an Olympic athlete." Adrian stared at the numbers on his screen, hardly believing what he was seeing. Not only were his billions restored, but the improved efficiency of the new system had actually increased his company's projected value. The merger deal he'd thought was lost forever was not only salvageable but would now be worth even more than originally projected. "The hackers," he said suddenly, remembering the criminals who'd started this nightmare. "Can we trace them?" Jasmine's smile was almost predatory. "Way ahead of you. While I was rebuilding your systems, I was also following their digital trail. Every move they made left traces in your logs, and I've been collecting evidence all night. I've got their locations, their methods, and enough proof to put them away for a very long time. I've already sent everything to the FBI's cybercrime division." Adrian felt a surge of admiration that bordered on awe. This remarkable woman hadn't just saved his company, she'd turned his worst nightmare into an opportunity for justice and improvement. In one night, she'd accomplished what his entire IT department couldn't have done in months, and she'd done it with a grace and intelligence that left him speechless. "Jasmine," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you. You've saved everything I've worked for, everything I am. How can I possibly repay this?" She looked up from her laptop, her dark eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart skip. "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Blackwood. Sometimes people just need help, and when you have the ability to provide it, you do. That's what decent human beings do for each other." But Adrian shook his head. Decent human beings didn't perform miracles. Decent human beings didn't sacrifice their Saturday night to save a stranger's empire. Decent human beings didn't rebuild entire corporate infrastructures with the casual competence of someone fixing a leaky faucet. What Jasmine had done went far beyond simple human decency. As the sun began to rise outside, painting the server room in shades of gold and amber, Adrian realized that this night had changed him fundamentally. Not just because his company had been saved, but because he'd discovered something he'd forgotten in all his years of corporate success. There were still people in the world whose hearts were bigger than their ambitions, people whose first instinct was to help rather than to take advantage. And he was determined to make sure Jasmine Washington never had to clean another office unless she chose to. By 7 a.m., Adrian's executive team began arriving for what they assumed would be a crisis management meeting. Instead, they found their CEO refreshed and energetic, standing beside a young African-American woman who was expertly explaining the new security protocols she'd implemented overnight. The transformation in both the company's systems and Adrian's demeanor was so complete that several board members actually questioned whether they were in the right building. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian announced to his gathered staff, his voice carrying an authority and confidence that had been absent the night before, "I'd like you to meet Jasmine Washington, the cybersecurity consultant who not only saved our company but made it stronger than ever. Everything we lost has been recovered, our systems are more secure than they've ever been, and the criminals responsible are now in FBI custody." The room buzzed with amazed conversation as Jasmine, still wearing her cleaning uniform but now carrying herself like the executive she truly was, walked them through the technical details of the recovery. Adrian watched his highly paid engineers and security experts hanging on her every word, asking questions that revealed their respect for her expertise. Several of them were taking notes as if they were students and she was their professor. James Morrison, Adrian's chief technology officer, raised his hand like a schoolboy. "Ms. Washington, the efficiency improvements you've implemented are extraordinary. Our processing speed has increased by 40% while our security has tripled. How did you accomplish this? Jasmine smiled, completely comfortable addressing the room full of executives. Sometimes an outside perspective helps you see solutions that are invisible from the inside. Your previous system had grown organically over time, accumulating redundancies and inefficiencies. Starting fresh allowed me to design something optimized for your actual needs rather than adapted from old frameworks. Adrian felt a surge of pride watching her command the respect of his team. These were some of the brightest minds in the tech industry, and they were clearly impressed by her work. But more than that, he could see that they recognized her natural leadership abilities, the way she explained complex concepts clearly and made everyone feel included in the discussion. Ms. Washington, said Patricia Chin, the company's chief financial officer, the projected value increase from these improvements is substantial. Our merger negotiations, which we thought were dead, are now looking extremely favorable. The other party is going to be very impressed when they see what we've accomplished. Adrian nodded, thinking about the phone calls he'd need to make to resurrect the deal that had seemed impossible just 12 hours earlier. But first, he had more important business to handle. Jasmine, could I speak with you privately for a moment? They stepped into his office, where the morning sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting everything in golden light. The monitors that had shown nothing but error messages the night before now displayed healthy, thriving company statistics. It felt like stepping into a completely different reality. Jasmine, Adrian began, his voice serious, what you've done for me for this company goes beyond anything I could have hoped for. You've given me back my life, my legacy, everything. I want to make you an offer, and I need you to accept it without argument. Jasmine tilted her head, curiosity evident in her expression. What kind of offer? First, I'm making you Chief Information Security Officer, effective immediately. The salary is $800,000 annually, plus bonuses based on company performance. You'll have a full team under you and unlimited budget for security improvements. Jasmine's eyes widened, but before she could speak, Adrian continued. Second, I'm giving you a 5% equity stake in the company. Based on our current valuation, that's worth approximately $200 million, and it will only grow as we expand. Mr. Blackwood, I can't possibly, Jasmine started, but Adrian held up his hand. Third, I'm buying you a house. Not just any house, but the house of your dreams. Whatever you want, wherever you want it. And I'm setting up a scholarship fund in your mother's name for students pursuing careers in technology and healthcare. Jasmine stared at him, clearly overwhelmed by the magnitude of his offers. This is too much. I just did what anyone would do. No, Adrian interrupted firmly. What you did was extraordinary. You saved a company worth billions of dollars. You prevented thousands of people from losing their jobs. You turned a complete disaster into a triumph. And most importantly, you did it for someone you didn't even know, expecting nothing in return. That kind of character is priceless. He walked to his desk and pulled out a leather folder containing contracts his lawyers had prepared while they'd been in the server room. These offers aren't negotiable, Jasmine. They're thank you gifts. You can accept them graciously or you can accept them reluctantly, but you're going to accept them. Jasmine looked at the contracts, then back at Adrian's determined face. Slowly, a smile spread across her features. You're not going to take no for an answer, are you? Absolutely not. In fact, I'm prepared to be completely unreasonable about this. If you don't accept these offers, I'll just keep making bigger ones until you give in. Well, Jasmine said, her smile growing wider, I suppose I don't have much choice then. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. This changes everything for me. Please call me Adrian. And you're wrong about one thing, Jasmine. You're not changing everything for just you. You're changing everything for both of us. As Jasmine signed the contracts that would transform her life, Adrian realized he was witnessing something beautiful. The moment when someone's life changed forever because they'd had the courage to help a stranger in need. But he also knew that his own transformation was just beginning. Meeting Jasmine had reminded him of values he'd forgotten, priorities he'd lost sight of, and possibilities he'd never considered. The merger deal that had seemed so important yesterday now felt like just another business transaction. What felt important now was making sure that the remarkable woman sitting across from him never had to worry about money or security again. She'd given him back his empire. The least he could do was give her everything she deserved in return. 3 weeks after that life-changing night, Adrian stood in the doorway of Jasmine's new corner office, watching her direct a team of cybersecurity specialists with the natural authority of someone born to lead. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the cleaning uniform, replaced by a sharp navy blazer and pencil skirt that commanded instant respect. But more striking than her new wardrobe was the confidence that seemed to radiate from her every gesture, the way she effortlessly commanded attention when she spoke. "The firewall implementation is ahead of schedule," she was telling her team, pointing to a complex diagram on the wall-mounted display. "But I want to run additional penetration tests before we declare victory. Remember, overconfidence is the enemy of security." Adrian smiled at her thoroughness. In just 3 weeks, Jasmine had revolutionized the company's entire approach to cybersecurity. Their systems were now among the most secure in the industry, and word was spreading through the tech community about the brilliant new CISO at Blackwood Industries. As her team dispersed to their various tasks, Jasmine noticed Adrian in the doorway. "Good morning, Adrian. Ready for the board presentation this afternoon?" "That's actually why I'm here," Adrian said, stepping into her office and closing the door behind him. "But first I have something for you." He handed her an elegant envelope sealed with the company's embossed logo. Jasmine opened it carefully, her eyes widening as she read the contents. "A company credit card with no spending limit?" she asked, looking up at him with a mixture of amusement and concern. "Adrian, you've already given me more than I could spend in a lifetime." "This isn't about spending," Adrian replied, settling into the chair across from her desk. "This is about freedom. I never want you to hesitate before buying something you need or want. Clothes, cars, vacations, gifts for friends, investments, charitable donations, whatever brings you joy or serves your purposes. Money should never be a consideration in your decisions again." Jasmine held the card up to the light, shaking her head with a wry smile. "You know, most people would think you're crazy for giving someone unlimited access to your money." "Most people didn't save my company and my sanity in a single night," Adrian replied. "Besides, I've learned something important these past few weeks. Generosity isn't about the money you give away. It's about recognizing when someone deserves everything good that life can offer and making sure they get it." Before Jasmine could protest further, Adrian pulled out another envelope, this one containing keys. "Your new house is ready, by the way. The interior designer finished yesterday. I took the liberty of furnishing it completely, including a state-of-the-art home office and a library I think you'll appreciate." "You furnished the entire house?" Jasmine asked, her voice carrying a note of wonder. "Without even asking what I like?" "I paid attention," Adrian said simply. "I noticed things about people who matter to me. You prefer clean lines over ornate decoration. You like natural light and comfortable furniture that's built to last. You appreciate quality without ostentation. And you need space to think and create." Jasmine stood up and walked to her office window, looking out at the city spread below them. "Adrian, can I ask you something? Why are you doing all this? And please don't say it's just gratitude. This goes beyond thanking someone for their help." Adrian joined her at the window, studying her profile as she gazed out at the skyline. "You want the honest answer? Because in all my 52 years I've never met anyone like you. You had every reason to walk past my office that night. You could have minded your own business, finished your cleaning route, and gone home. Instead, you saw someone in trouble and chose to help, even though I was a complete stranger." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But more than that, you did it without expecting anything in return. You weren't calculating what you might gain or how you might benefit. You just saw someone who needed help and you had the ability to provide it, so you did. That kind of character is rare, Jasmine. Rarer than talent, rarer than intelligence, rarer than ambition." Jasmine turned to face him, her dark eyes reflecting the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. "So you're trying to reward my character?" "I'm trying to show you what you're worth," Adrian replied, his voice carrying an intensity that surprised them both. "For 2 years, you sacrificed your career to care for your mother. You worked night shifts cleaning offices to pay for her medical care. You put her needs above your own ambitions without complaint. Then you saved my company and asked for nothing in return. The world needs more people like you, Jasmine, and it's my privilege to make sure you're never undervalued again." A soft knock interrupted their conversation. Adrian's assistant, Margaret, peered around the door. "Mr. Blackwood? The board members are arriving for the presentation." "We'll be right there," Adrian replied, then turned back to Jasmine. "Ready to show them what real leadership looks like?" Jasmine picked up her presentation materials, her movements confident and assured. "Ready. But Adrian, after the presentation we need to talk about something important." "What's that?" She smiled, an expression that seemed to light up the entire room. "You've given me everything I could possibly need to succeed professionally. Now I want to do something for you. Something personal." Adrian felt his pulse quicken at the warmth in her voice, but before he could ask what she meant, she was already heading toward the door. As he followed her toward the boardroom, he couldn't help but wonder what this remarkable woman had in mind. Whatever it was, he found himself eager to discover just how much more his life was about to change. The boardroom fell silent as Jasmine concluded her presentation on the company's new cybersecurity infrastructure. 12 of the most powerful executives in the tech industry sat around the polished conference table, their expressions ranging from impressed to amazed. Charts and graphs displayed on the wall screens showed improvements in every category. System efficiency up 43%, security ratings at an all-time high, and projected cost savings in the millions. Questions? Jasmine asked, her voice calm and professional as she looked around the table. Board member Elizabeth Harper, a veteran tech executive known for her tough questioning, leaned forward. Ms. Washington, these improvements seem almost impossible. How can you guarantee that our systems will remain secure against future attacks? You can't guarantee security, Mrs. Harper, Jasmine replied without hesitation. What you can do is build systems that are adaptive, resilient, and capable of learning from each attempt to breach them. Our new infrastructure doesn't just block attacks, it analyzes them, learns from them, and becomes stronger with each encounter. Adrian watched from his seat at the head of the table, feeling a surge of pride as his board members nodded approvingly. In 6 weeks, Jasmine had gone from cleaning their offices to commanding their respect as an equal. But more than her technical expertise, what impressed him was her natural leadership presence. She answered questions with quiet confidence, acknowledged uncertainties without defensiveness, and made complex concepts accessible to everyone in the room. Excellent work, Ms. Washington, said Board Chairman Robert Sterling, a man notorious for his reluctance to praise anyone. Your leadership has transformed not just our security infrastructure but our entire approach to technological innovation. I think I speak for the entire board when I say we're fortunate to have you as part of our executive team. As the meeting concluded and board members filed out, several stopped to speak privately with Jasmine, discussing potential collaborations and seeking her advice on their own company's security challenges. Adrian noticed how naturally she networked, how easily she built connections and earned respect. She wasn't just technically brilliant, she was a natural executive. That was impressive, Adrian said as the last board member left. You've completely won them over. They're good people, Jasmine replied, gathering her materials. Smart, experienced, genuinely concerned about the company's success. It's easy to work with people like that. Walk with me, Adrian said, loosening his tie as they left the boardroom. I want to show you something. He led her to the elevator that accessed the executive floors, using his private key to take them to the top level of the building. When the doors opened, they stepped into what had once been a rarely used conference area. Now it had been completely transformed into something that took Jasmine's breath away. The entire floor had been converted into a state-of-the-art research and development center, with workstations equipped with the latest technology, collaborative spaces designed for team innovation, and glass-walled offices that promoted both privacy and transparency. But what made it special was the attention to detail that reflected Jasmine's preferences. Natural lighting, comfortable furniture, living plants throughout the space, and clean lines that promoted both productivity and peace of mind. This is your department, Adrian said, watching her face carefully. Your team, your vision, your rules. I want you to build the most innovative cybersecurity division in the world, and I want you to do it your way. Jasmine walked slowly through the space, running her fingers along the smooth surfaces of the workstations, taking in the panoramic views of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Adrian, this must have cost millions to design and build. 18 million, actually, Adrian replied casually. But it's not about the money. It's about giving you the tools and environment you need to do what you do best. Great minds need great spaces to create great things. She turned to face him, her eyes bright with emotion. Why do you keep doing this? All these gifts, all these opportunities, it's like you're trying to give me the world. Adrian stepped closer, his voice growing serious. Maybe because you gave me mine. But it's more than that, Jasmine. Watching you work these past weeks, seeing how you lead your team, how you solve problems, how you treat everyone with respect regardless of their position. You've reminded me what excellence actually looks like. He gestured toward the windows overlooking the city. I built this company thinking success meant accumulating money and power. But you've shown me that real success means using your abilities to make things better for other people. You've changed how I see everything. Jasmine moved to one of the large windows, looking out at the busy streets below where people hurried to and from their daily responsibilities. Can I tell you something? That night when I found you in your office, I almost didn't stop. I had 3 more floors to clean, and I was tired, and getting involved in executive problems wasn't part of my job description. What made you stop? You looked like my father did the night before he died, she said quietly. Defeated. Like all the fight had gone out of him. I couldn't walk away from that, even from a stranger. She turned back to Adrian, a small smile playing at her lips. But I never imagined that stopping to help someone would lead to all this. Adrian felt his heart skip as he looked at her standing there in the golden afternoon light, surrounded by the space he'd created specifically for her. Jasmine, there's something else I need to tell you. Something I've been trying to figure out how to say for weeks. Before he could continue, her phone buzzed with an urgent message. She glanced at it and her expression changed. Adrian, we need to get back downstairs. My team just detected another attempted breach. It looks like the original hackers' associates are trying to probe our new defenses. As they hurried back to the elevator, Adrian realized that whatever he'd been about to say would have to wait. But watching Jasmine shift immediately into crisis mode, her mind already working through solutions and strategies, he felt a surge of admiration that went far beyond professional respect. This remarkable woman had become the center of his world, and he was beginning to understand that his feelings for her went deeper than gratitude or even friendship. The question was whether she felt the same way, and whether he'd have the courage to find out. The attempted breach had been neutralized within minutes, but it confirmed what Jasmine had suspected. The original attackers weren't working alone. As evening settled over the city, she and Adrian found themselves alone in her department, surrounded by monitors displaying network traffic patterns and security logs. Her team had gone home, confident that their new systems could handle any threats, but Jasmine wanted to run additional diagnostics herself. Coffee? Adrian asked, returning from the break room with 2 steaming cups. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him during business hours. Thank you, Jasmine replied, accepting the cup gratefully. You know, you don't have to stay. This is just routine monitoring at this point. I want to be here, Adrian said, settling into the chair beside her workstation. Besides, I like watching you work. You approach problems differently than anyone I've ever known. Methodically, but with this intuitive understanding of how systems interact. Jasmine smiled, her fingers continuing to move across the keyboard as she analyzed data streams. My mother used to say I could see patterns that other people missed. When I was little, I'd spend hours watching ant colonies in our backyard, figuring out how they communicated and organized themselves. Maybe that's why computer networks make sense to me. They're just another kind of organized system. Tell me about her, Adrian said softly. Your mother. What was she like? Jasmine's typing slowed as she considered the question. Strong. Stubborn. Funny in ways that caught you by surprise. She worked 3 jobs to put me through college, never complained about being tired or stressed. Even when she got sick, she worried more about me than herself. She pulled up another diagnostic screen, but Adrian could see that her mind was elsewhere, lost in memories. The last thing she said to me was that she was proud of who I'd become, but she wanted me to remember that success wasn't just about what you achieved for yourself. It was about what you did to make other people's lives better. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. She would have liked you actually. She always said she could tell a person's character by how they treated people who couldn't do anything for them. Jasmine glanced at him with a meaningful look. You've been nothing but kind to me from the moment you learned I could help you, but more importantly, you've been respectful and generous to every member of my team, regardless of their position or background. Adrian felt warmth spread through his chest at her words. Your mother taught you well. You embody everything she described about true success. As they worked together in the quiet office, Adrian found himself studying Jasmine's profile in the glow of the computer monitors. She'd pulled her hair back in a ponytail, and the concentrated expression on her face reminded him of that first night when she'd saved his company. But now he was noticing other things. The graceful line of her neck, the way she bit her lower lip when she was thinking, the soft laugh that escaped when she solved a particularly tricky problem. Adrian, she said suddenly, turning to face him, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why aren't you married? I mean, successful, intelligent, generous. Surely there have been women interested in a relationship with you. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, considering how to answer honestly. There have been relationships over the years. But looking back, I think they were all based on what I could provide rather than who I actually was. The money, the lifestyle, the social status. I got so focused on building the business that I forgot to build anything real with another person. He met her eyes, seeing understanding there rather than judgment. What about you? Someone as remarkable as you must have had serious relationships. A few, Jasmine admitted. But when my mother got sick, those relationships revealed their true nature pretty quickly. Amazing how fast people disappear when life gets complicated and inconvenient. I learned that someone who really cares about you doesn't see sacrifice as burden. They see it as love. What do you think happens when two people discover they've been searching for each other their whole lives without knowing it? Subscribe and let us know your thoughts on where this beautiful connection might lead. The silence that followed was comfortable but charged with unspoken possibilities. Adrian realized they were having the kind of conversation he'd never had with anyone, the kind of honest, vulnerable exchange that revealed character and created genuine intimacy. This wasn't the polite small talk of business networking or the calculated charm of social climbing. This was two people discovering they understood each other in ways that surprised them both. Jasmine, he said carefully, these past weeks working with you, getting to know you, it's been the best period of my life. Not just because you saved my company, but because you've reminded me who I wanted to be before I got lost in the pursuit of success. She turned her chair to face him fully, her dark eyes reflecting the soft glow of the monitors around them. You've changed my life too, Adrian. Not just with the job and the opportunities, but by showing me that there are still people in the world who understand the value of treating others with genuine respect and generosity. Adrian felt his pulse quicken at the warmth in her voice, the way she was looking at him with an openness that suggested their relationship was shifting into territory neither of them had anticipated. I need to tell you something, Jasmine. Over these weeks, watching you work, talking with you, learning who you are, my feelings have grown into something much deeper than professional admiration or personal gratitude. Jasmine's breath caught slightly, but she didn't look away. What kind of feelings? The kind that make me think about you first thing in the morning and last thing at night. The kind that make me want to share everything good that happens to me with you. The kind that make me realize I've been waiting my whole life to meet someone exactly like you without even knowing it. The admission hung between them in the quiet office, surrounded by the gentle hum of computers and the soft glow of city lights beyond the windows. Adrian felt vulnerable in a way he hadn't experienced since childhood, having laid his heart bare to someone whose response could either fulfill him completely or devastate him entirely. Jasmine reached across the small space between their chairs and took his hand, her fingers warm and sure as they intertwined with his. Adrian, I've been feeling the same thing. But I was afraid to acknowledge it, afraid it might complicate everything wonderful that's happened between us. Relief and joy flooded through Adrian as he squeezed her hand gently. Nothing could complicate what we have, Jasmine. What we have is rare and precious and worth protecting. As they sat together in the soft light of the monitors, hands linked and hearts open, Adrian realized that saving his company had been just the beginning of what Jasmine would mean to his life. She hadn't just rescued his business, she'd rescued his capacity for genuine connection, real intimacy, and true partnership. 2 months had passed since that evening in the office when everything between Adrian and Jasmine had shifted from professional respect to something deeper and more personal. Their relationship had developed with the same careful precision that Jasmine applied to her cybersecurity work. Thoughtfully, authentically, and with attention to building something that would last. Adrian had never experienced anything like the easy companionship they shared. They worked together seamlessly during the day, their professional partnership enhanced by their growing personal connection. Evenings found them exploring the city together, trying new restaurants, attending concerts, or simply walking through parks while discussing everything from technology trends to philosophy to childhood memories. What struck Adrian most was how natural everything felt with Jasmine. There was no pretense, no calculation, no sense that either of them was performing a role. She appreciated the finer things his wealth could provide, but she was equally happy sharing pizza on his office floor while they worked late or browsing through bookstores on lazy Saturday afternoons. Her contentment came from their connection, not from what he could buy or provide. This particular evening, they were in Adrian's penthouse apartment, working together on laptops while soft jazz played in the background. Jasmine was reviewing security protocols for the upcoming product launch while Adrian handled correspondence with international clients. The domestic scene felt remarkably comfortable, as if they'd been sharing evening like this for years rather than weeks. Adrian, Jasmine said looking up from her laptop, I've been thinking about something. The scholarship fund you set up in my mother's name has received over 200 applications already. The stories these students are sharing about their backgrounds and goals, it's incredibly moving. Adrian smiled, saving his document and turning his attention fully to her. Your mother would be proud. We're giving opportunities to students who might otherwise never have the chance to pursue their dreams in technology and healthcare. That's exactly what I mean, Jasmine said, closing her laptop and moving to sit beside him on the sofa. You didn't just write a check and forget about it. You've been personally reviewing applications, making sure the selection process is fair and thorough. You've been visiting recipients at their schools, mentoring them, taking genuine interest in their success. She curled up next to him, her head resting against his shoulder in the comfortable intimacy that had developed between them. Do you realize how rare that kind of personal investment is? Most wealthy people delegate their charitable giving to staff members and never think about it again. Adrian wrapped his arm around her, breathing in the subtle scent of her perfume. I learned from watching you that real generosity isn't just about money. It's about caring enough to stay involved, to make sure your help actually makes a difference in people's lives. See, that's what I'm talking about, Jasmine said, tilting her head to look up at him. You keep saying you learned from me, but Adrian, you were already the kind of person who would stay late to help a distressed employee, who would personally review scholarship applications, who would take time to mentor young people. I just reminded you of who you already were. Adrian considered her words, thinking about the man he'd been before that desperate night when she'd found him in his office. Had he always possessed the capacity for this kind of caring, or had loving Jasmine awakened something in him that had been dormant for years? You know what I think happened? Jasmine continued, her voice soft and thoughtful. I think you spent so many years focused on building your business that you forgot to pay attention to the person you were becoming in the process. Success can be isolating if you let it. But underneath all that isolation, you were still the same person who chose to build a company that creates jobs and develops technology that improves people's lives. Adrian felt a surge of emotion at her words. This was what he'd fallen in love with about Jasmine. Her ability to see the best in people while still maintaining realistic expectations, her gift for understanding the complex motivations behind human behavior. She didn't idealize him, but she recognized his genuine goodness in ways that made him want to live up to her perception of who he could be. Jasmine, he said, his voice taking on a serious tone that made her sit up and look at him directly. These months with you have been the happiest of my life. Not just because of the romance, but because of the partnership. Working together, supporting each other's goals, building something meaningful together. It feels like what I've been searching for my entire adult life without knowing it. She reached up to touch his face gently, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I feel the same way. But Adrian, I need you to know something. Even if you lost everything tomorrow, even if the business failed and all the money disappeared, my feelings for you wouldn't change. I fell in love with the man who stays late to help solve problems, who remembers the names of security guards and cleaning staff, who gets excited about creating opportunities for young people. Adrian felt his heart skip at her words. You fell in love with me? Jasmine smiled, an expression of such warmth and certainty that it took his breath away. Completely. Absolutely. Irrevocably in love with you. The admission settled between them like a blessing, confirming what they'd both been feeling but hadn't yet found the courage to voice. Adrian pulled her closer, marveling at how perfectly she fit in his arms, how right everything felt when she was near. I love you too, he said, the words carrying the weight of absolute truth. I love your intelligence and your compassion. I love how you challenge me to be better while accepting exactly who I am. I love that you see possibilities where other people see problems. I love that you chose to help a stranger in distress and changed both our lives forever. As they held each other in the quiet of his apartment, city lights twinkling beyond the windows, Adrian realized that this was the moment everything crystallized. This was when he understood with perfect clarity that Jasmine wasn't just the woman he loved. She was the partner he wanted for everything that lay ahead, the person he wanted to build a future with, the missing piece that would make his life complete. Tomorrow he would start planning the most important proposal of his life. Not a business merger or corporate acquisition, but an offer of his heart, his future, and everything he had to give to the remarkable woman who had already given him so much more than she could ever know. Adrian spent the next week planning with the same meticulous attention to detail he brought to major business deals, but this time the stakes were infinitely more personal. He wanted everything to be perfect for Jasmine, wanted the moment to reflect both the depth of his feelings and his understanding of who she truly was. This wasn't about impressing her with extravagance. It was about showing her that he'd been paying attention to everything that mattered to her. The plan came together beautifully. Saturday morning found them driving to a location outside the city that Adrian claimed was a surprise for their weekend getaway. Jasmine, relaxed and happy beside him in the passenger seat, wore a simple blue sundress that brought out the warmth in her dark eyes. She'd been working hard on a new security protocol all week, and Adrian could see the satisfaction in her expression that came from solving complex problems. "Are you going to give me any hints about where we're going?" she asked, watching the familiar cityscape give way to rolling hills and farmland. "You'll see soon enough," Adrian replied, trying to keep the nervous excitement out of his voice. "But I will say that it's somewhere that connects to something important you shared with me." They drove for another 20 minutes before Adrian turned onto a private road that led to a stunning property. A renovated farmhouse surrounded by carefully maintained gardens and framed by mature oak trees. But what made Jasmine gasp with recognition was the large building beside the main house, clearly designed as a state-of-the-art computer lab and educational facility. "Adrian," she breathed, stepping out of the car and looking around in amazement. "What is this place?" "This is the new home of the Washington Institute for Technology and Healthcare," Adrian said, taking her hand and leading her toward the main building. "A fully funded educational facility that will provide free training and certification programs for underserved communities. Students will learn cybersecurity, software development, medical technology, and healthcare administration." Jasmine stopped walking, staring at him with an expression of pure wonder. "You named it after my mother?" "I named it after both of you," Adrian corrected gently. "This institute represents everything your mother taught you about success, using your abilities to make other people's lives better. And it's designed around everything I've learned from watching you work. That real education happens when students feel supported, respected, and connected to something meaningful." He led her through the facility, showing her classrooms equipped with the latest technology, simulation labs for healthcare training, collaborative spaces designed for team projects, and a library stocked with resources covering everything from basic computer literacy to advanced cybersecurity protocols. Every detail had been planned with Jasmine's educational philosophy in mind. "The first class of students starts next month," Adrian explained as they toured the residential facilities where students from distant communities could stay during intensive training programs. "We've already received over 1,000 applications from people who never thought they'd have access to this kind of education." Jasmine moved through the spaces with tears in her eyes, touching surfaces and examining equipment with the wonder of someone seeing a dream brought to life. "Adrian, this is incredible. This will change so many lives. How long have you been planning this?" "Since the day you told me that real success means making things better for other people," Adrian replied. "I wanted to show you that I'd been listening, that your mother's wisdom had found a home in someone who could act on it." They ended the tour in the main building's conference room, which had been set up with a catered lunch overlooking the gardens. As they sat together, sharing a meal and talking about the Institute's potential impact, Adrian felt his nervousness building toward the moment he'd been planning for weeks. "Jasmine," he said finally, setting down his fork and turning to face her fully, "there's something else I want to show you. Something more personal." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small velvet box, placing it gently on the table between them. Jasmine's eyes widened, her breath catching as she realized what was happening. "6 months ago, I was a man who thought he had everything but was actually missing the most important thing of all. Someone to share it with. Then you walked into my life and showed me what partnership really means, what love really looks like, what it feels like to find someone who sees you completely and loves you anyway." Adrian opened the box to reveal a stunning but elegant engagement ring, the diamond surrounded by smaller stones in a setting that was beautiful without being ostentatious. "Jasmine Washington, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in everything that matters? Will you help me build a life that's worthy of the love we've found together?" Jasmine stared at the ring, then up at his face, her eyes bright with tears of joy. "Adrian, yes. Yes, absolutely yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Adrian felt a completeness he'd never experienced before. This wasn't just about romance or companionship. This was about finding someone who made him better, someone who challenged him to use his privileges and resources for meaningful purposes, someone who loved him for who he was while inspiring him to become who he could be. "I have a confession," Jasmine said, admiring the ring on her finger. "I've been hoping you'd ask. These months with you have shown me what it means to be truly partners, not just in love but in purpose. You've supported my goals, celebrated my successes, and shown me that marriage can be about building something together that's bigger than either of us could create alone." Adrian pulled her close, holding her against his heart as afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows of the institute they'd built together. "We're going to have an extraordinary life, Jasmine. Full of purpose and joy and the kind of love that makes everything else possible." As they held each other in the quiet of the conference room, surrounded by evidence of what they could accomplish when they combined their resources and dreams, Adrian knew that this moment marked the beginning of the greatest adventure of his life. He'd found his perfect partner, his intellectual equal, his emotional anchor, and the woman who would help him build a legacy worth leaving behind. 1 year later, Adrian and Jasmine stood together in the garden of their new home, surrounded by family, friends, and colleagues who had gathered to celebrate their wedding. The ceremony had been everything they'd both wanted. Elegant but warm, personal rather than ostentatious, focused on the commitment they were making to each other rather than on impressing their guests. The past year had been a whirlwind of success and growth. Blackwood Industries had completed its largest merger ever, establishing itself as the premier cybersecurity company in North America. The Washington Institute had graduated its first class of students, with a 98% job placement rate in high-paying tech and healthcare positions. The scholarship program had expanded to support over 500 students annually. But for Adrian, the greatest success had been watching Jasmine flourish as both a business leader and a life partner. She'd been featured on the covers of 3 major tech magazines, had been invited to speak at conferences around the world, and had become recognized as one of the most innovative thinkers in cybersecurity. More importantly, she'd maintained the warmth and integrity that had first attracted him, never allowing success to change her fundamental character. "Mrs. Blackwood," Adrian said softly, pulling her close as their guests danced on the lawn around them, "how does it feel to be married to a man who's completely, utterly, helplessly in love with you?" Jasmine laughed, the sound bright and joyful against the backdrop of celebration. "It feels like the best adventure I could ever imagine. Though I have to say, I'm still getting used to the name change. Jasmine Blackwood has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" "I think everything about you has a nice ring to it," Adrian replied, spinning her gently as the music swelled around them. "Your laugh, your voice when you're explaining complex problems, the way you say my name when you're excited about a new idea." As they danced, Adrian's mind drifted back to that night almost 18 months ago when he'd thought his world was ending. He'd been sitting alone in his office, watching his empire crumble, convinced that he'd lost everything that mattered. He could never have imagined that his salvation would come in the form of a night cleaner with hidden talents and a heart generous enough to help a stranger in distress. "What are you thinking about?" Jasmine asked, noticing the reflective expression on his face. "That night when we met," Adrian replied. "If someone had told me then that the woman emptying my trash cans would become my wife, my business partner, and the love of my life, I would have thought they were crazy." Jasmine smiled up at him, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "If someone had told me that offering to help a stressed-out CEO would lead to all this, I might have stopped to fix my hair first." "Your hair was perfect," Adrian said seriously. "Everything about you was perfect. You just didn't know it yet." As the evening wore on, Adrian found himself watching their guests with deep satisfaction. His board members were deep in conversation with graduates from the Washington Institute, discussing job opportunities and career development. Jasmine's former cleaning crew colleagues were chatting with tech executives, the barriers of class and profession dissolved by genuine mutual respect. The scholarship recipients they'd mentored over the past year were sharing stories with Adrian's longtime friends, all of them part of the extended family they'd created together. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood," called James Morrison, Adrian's CTO, raising his champagne glass. "I'd like to propose a toast." The crowd gathered around as James cleared his throat. 18 months ago, we thought we were attending a funeral for this company. Instead, we got to witness a resurrection. But more than that, we got to see 2 remarkable people find each other and create something beautiful together. Adrian and Jasmine, you've shown us that the best partnerships aren't just about combining resources or skills. They're about finding someone who makes you want to be better than you ever thought possible. The applause was warm and sustained, but Adrian barely heard it. He was focused entirely on his wife, on the joy radiating from her face, on the sense of completeness that filled his chest whenever she was near. Later, as their guests began to leave and the garden grew quiet, Adrian and Jasmine found themselves alone under the stars, still in their wedding clothes but with shoes abandoned on the grass. "So, Mrs. Blackwood," Adrian said, pulling her close in the moonlight, "what's next for us? What dreams should we chase together now?" Jasmine considered the question seriously, as she considered everything that mattered to her. "I want to expand the Institute internationally. I want to mentor more young women in technology. I want to work with you to build businesses that create meaningful opportunities for people who might otherwise be overlooked." She paused, a soft smile playing at her lips. "And I want to start a family with you, raise children who understand that privilege comes with responsibility and that love means using your abilities to lift other people up." Adrian felt his heart swell with love and anticipation. "All of that sounds perfect. Though I have to warn you, our children are going to have very high standards for what love looks like. They'll expect partners who are brilliant, generous, courageous, and willing to save collapsing empires on a Saturday night. Then we'll just have to make sure we raise them to be worthy of that kind of love themselves, Jasmine replied. Standing on her toes to kiss him softly. As they walked hand in hand toward their house, Adrian reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. He'd learned that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected sources, that sometimes the person who changes your life forever is someone you might otherwise never notice, and that sometimes the greatest success comes not from what you accumulate but from what you're willing to give away. But most importantly, he'd learned that love isn't just about finding someone who completes you. It's about finding someone who inspires you to become the person you were always meant to be, someone who sees your potential even when you've forgotten it yourself, someone who chooses to help you rebuild when your world falls apart. In Jasmine he'd found all of that and more. He'd found his perfect partner, his greatest adventure, and his happiest ending that was really just the beginning of everything beautiful that lay ahead.